Hello. Good evening, good evening. Welcome. Come on in, come on in, come on in. So excited to have you all tonight for another installment of The Best Investment. Thank you all so much for coming on. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So excited to have you on tonight. Okay, I'm so excited because I'm so excited about this whole entire, but I'm going to bring my special guest on now, and then I will do my introduction, but I want to make sure that we are all set to go. Hey there!
Miss Mona-Lee, wagwan.
Not much, one.
Feeling good, feeling excited, ready for this conversation.
Yes, yes, such a long-awaited conversation. I'm tremendously excited about this series. I think it's so important, especially because of where we're at the tail end of the year, and so much can happen in these next couple of days. But also, we have to get into a place where we're ready to jump into 2022. So before I get started, I'm going to introduce myself. So for those of you who are new, to this space, The Best Investment. Thank you so much for joining me. My name is Mona-Lee Belizaire. I am a personal growth strategist, and I specifically help young adult women move from where they are to where they want to be. I'm also the creator of the I Am Choosing Me movement, which is a movement to encourage women to choose themselves in every area of their lives. Tonight, you're on with me for The Best Investment. So I have been doing this series since May of this year. And we are at the end of the year, and I'm very excited because this entire month of December, and I hope you follow me and come back on again this entire month of December, I'm going to be doing a leap series. And so I'm going to have guests each week to come on and share their own leap stories. So what is something that they did to step out, to jump out on faith? They did it with God. They did it on shore. They had Abraham, Moses, and all types of experience all the way down. And so I'm so excited to have these individuals come on over the course of the next couple of weeks, all month of December, to share how they leaped in ministry, how they leaped in their career, how they leaped in their personal lives, that moved from corporate to their own business. So lots going on. But tonight, we have the man himself, Miguel Melbourne, and I'm so excited to have my friend on, and I consider him a friend because he has been tremendously supportive of anything that I have done, whether it's sharing something on his Instagram page, having me on his show when we did the fast for Jesus, for Jamaica, through Jesus and Jamaica. And so, Miguel, I'm so appreciative of your friendship. And we haven't known each other for that long, but he's truly a man who's very supportive. And I'm appreciative of that because, I'm supportive as well. And it doesn't take much to support people. So thank you so much. So welcome. I'm so excited because I know this story. Can you tell I'm excited? I know this story, but I'm so excited for you to share it because it was so different. It's so different from my understanding from what you would have been involved in. But before we get in there, I want you to tell folks about who Miguel is.
Absolutely. I just thank you again for, creating space for these conversations to happen. Of course, I'm super excited just to be a part of it. It's just so in line with the conversation in spaces folks our age, but just so many people need. And just to decompress and feel like, you know what, that was a good conversation that lift my spirit. So I just want to say thank you again. But with that, who's Miguel Anthony Melbourne? I think I could break that down in sort of three buckets, right? And the first bucket is I am simply just a blessed and very grateful Jamaican, and I always have to start there. And I start there because, my mom brought me to America in about 1996, and it was through the sacrifice and vision of my grandfather that she came to America. And, my grandfather brought my three uncles, my mom, my two aunts, and as a result, that's the reason I'm here. And so in many ways, I think I've lived my life in a way trying to make my grandfather proud, trying to make my mom proud, because ultimately, when a family migrate from their homeland to go to a foreign country, it's with the idea that better opportunities exist, right? And it's better for the family and for the legacy. And I think that's a deep part of who I am and the way I've pursued my life. I think the second bucket that makes me who I am and where I am right now is just like I've always been a thinker. You know, I'm a thinker, and I think I see the world first through like a mental lens, and I think that's always helped me to craft a vision as to where I wanted to go in the future. And everything I was pursuing, I always try to figure out what does the best version of that look like. You know, being a kid, what was the best version of me being in school look like, and that was getting A's. You know, going to college, what was the best version of that looking like? Leaving college, what was the best version of me being a young adult and trying to make my way, you know, finding jobs, and what does that look like? And so I think being a thinker and seeing the world through this mental lens is a big part of who I am. And, you know, I continue to try to craft those visions, right? In everything that I've pursued, I've been mostly successful. And I give that credit to first and foremost, you know, coming from a thoughtful place. And I think the last bucket where I am now is I am just a person, a man who is very curious as to what the best version of myself look like as a man. You know, I could look back and I remember being in Jamaica and, you know, what that was like. I think back to high school, it feels like it was yesterday. I think back to college, such an amazing time in my life. But the reality is, you know, I'm in my early 30s and I'm a man now. And so I'm very curious as to, you know, I'm also a father. My son is 12. What does the best version of Miguel as a dad look like? You know, what does the best version of Miguel as an entrepreneur look like? What does the best version of Miguel as a business partner, as a future husband, you know, as a brother? What does the best version of Miguel look like as a person that has great optimism to make an impact in my community? And I think that's where I am right now. I'm very curious. I'm learning every day, and I'm chasing that person.
That's good. That's good. I'm really loving when you talk about the best version, and it's in line with the best investment, because it's important for us to always be in a space where we are doing introspection, like we're always reflective, like where can we grow? And the end of the year is probably the best time to do something like this. And I also want to put a plug, because you said, you know, future husband. So he's single, y'all. This nephew.
Don't get me in trouble. I got a beautiful woman.
Oh,
You
sorry.
know what I'm saying?
Sorry.
Hey, I'm practicing. I'm practicing right now to be
You
the best
practicing.
man
All
that
right. Well,
she needs. You know, and so
let me not say too much because I don't want to get you in trouble. So sorry to whoever I'm saying sorry to. Sorry, Mrs. Sorry. All right, so let us get right into it. So tell us about your leap story. How did you come into Melbourne Motivation? What did that all look like? How did that even come together for you?
yeah, it's a great question. And one thing I always believe, and again, I think coming from Jamaica and being in America, I didn't know what I was supposed to be scared of. You know, certain opportunities I went into, I didn't know it was so important to other people. It's just I'm a Jamaican, I'm going after it. And with that, I grew up in the church, right? And so I have the spiritual basis as well. And, you know, what I've always felt is that God always sort of showed me where I was going to be before I got there. And so, you know, my leap story and how Melbourne Motivation came about, I feel like God prepared me for that moment long before the opportunity came. And so
Mm,
the first part is I remember leaving Bloomberg, which is an amazing company. You don't leave Bloomberg, right? Not many of us get there. But I left Bloomberg to jump into a family business. And that was my first time trying to do something from scratch. And it worked out, you know, it worked out. My family we had a restaurant, we had a nightclub, had an event space, and I was the business brain behind it that took it from nothing to making $42,000 a month. And that was the first time I was able to see that I had the resources, I had the people. That was the biggest deal. I had the people who were willing to rally around the vision that I was crafting. And, you know, that went where it went. But now when Melbourne Motivation came around, I had the same sense that the people I'd be able to impact, the purpose of Melbourne Motivation, and then the impact that I'd be able to make, that, you know what, I think I could do it, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
what happened is I got interviewed on 93.5 Ari Jam Radio, talking about the education business that I'm in through Path of the Purpose. And the person that interviewed me was leaving the station. And what that segment was all about was amplifying the voice of the youth, the young leaders who are of Caribbean heritage, who are doing great things. And so when the space opened up, I thought to myself, you know, this feels a lot like leaving Bloomberg to jump into a family business that was mainly serving Caribbeans. And I was like, I think, I think I could do this, right? This
Mm-hmm.
is all about connecting with young Caribbeans, you know, amplifying their voices. I'm curious to meet young Caribbeans doing amazing things. And
Right.
you know, it's a 15-minute interview. It airs on 93.5 FM, which is sort of like the Hot 97 for Caribbeans, right? It also airs in Jamaica, right? That's a recent development. Sundays at 9:30 p.m. And
Yes.
did I know where I was going to find guests? No, I had no idea. I didn't know. But I'm like, people are out there, you know. I just have to reach out to them and be as authentic as I could in recognizing what they do and in wanting to uplift their story. And so Melbourne Motivation right now is kind of like two buckets. One, it's that feature interview that I'm
Mm-hmm.
telling you, it's been divine. God has been holding me down and finding incredible people to interview, yourself being one of them. And there's just so much that's been divine. But there's the interview feature portion of it and that impact that it makes, you know, for in the lives of those individuals that I'm interviewing, the information and inspiration and motivation through the conversation that, you know, builds something in the audience. It gives the audience a chance to connect and follow the movement of my guests. But
Yep.
I think the bigger picture and where Melbourne Motivation is going is it's just building what I call cultural confidence in the
Mm.
Caribbean. And that's where my vision is now. That's where Melbourne Motivation is going. You know, we think
I
about the
like that.
Caribbean and, you know, we're considered a third world and
Mm.
countries. And you're like, what are you talking about? When I look around, Caribbean folks, they're amazing, right? And
Yes, we are.
anything we do, it doesn't just pop locally. It goes nationally. It goes globally. It doesn't matter
Around
what
the globe.
industry. Are you kidding? And so,
Mm-hmm.
can Melbourne Motivation serve as a way to uplift the voice of young Caribbean leaders doing amazing things for the broader diaspora to become engaged and to
Mm-hmm.
unite? And I wanted to be able, I want you, you know, Mona-Lee, you could decide, you know what, I want to buy a house, but I want to find someone who's Caribbean who's in real estate. I want you to go to
Mm.
melbournemotivation.com. I want you may think, you know, I want to find a career coach that's Caribbean, speak my language. You may say, I want to find a therapist, you know, who's Caribbean, speak my language. That's
Good.
where, you know, the vision and mission of Melbourne Motivation is going. But I'm telling you, all of it, as I'm even saying it right now, it's been God and it's been divine. And I think the last piece I'll tell you about just this leap story and how divine it was. Back in 2018, I was still in corporate. And I was just deciding, you know what do I want to do in 2019 and beyond? And
Mm-hmm.
I took a book and I wrote down 9 goals, 9 things that I could see myself doing. You know, trying to
Mm.
align my interests, my gifts with. And one of the things I wrote down, and it was actually the ninth thing, I wrote down that I would like to interview everyday Caribbean heroes. Now,
Wow.
that was back in
Yeah.
2018. And when I
Woo.
wrote it, I wasn't thinking about Melbourne Motivation, but I wanted to connect with young Caribbean leaders doing amazing things. And so now come 2021, and this opportunity just pops on my radar, and I didn't realize it right away. You know, I started Melbourne Motivation, I believe, in March of this year, and I found the book in maybe like May. And I'm reading through it,
Wow.
and I saw that I wrote that down. Like, is that not God? Is that
Yep,
not divine?
absolutely.
You know, so that's just a little scope around Melbourne Motivation and where it came from and how it's going and where I'm really looking to take it.
So clearly I didn't know the whole entire story, but I was just excited for the little that I did know because I knew a little bit. So let's back up a little bit. So how did you know that this was an opportunity that you should pursue? What was the decision process like? And even what was your conversation with God like? Because sometimes we are presented with really good opportunities, but not everything that's good is God. So what did that look like for you? How did it all unfold and unfold, I should say, and what made you step in and say, okay, you know what, I'm going to try this?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the first part was trying to see if what was required from, I've never been a radio host, you know, like what does that even look like, right? Um, but the mission, the purpose, does that align with my gifts? And I
Mm,
think God blessed me with the ability not to only think the thought, but to be able to express it. And I was like, well, I'm going to be interviewing people. Okay, right? This is in line with things that come natural. But going back even further, I grew up in church. My grandfather was the deacon, you know. My mom was on the choir. And I was the kid growing up in church that, you know, the pastor would always call on me to come up and speak, you know, sometimes.
mhm,
And sometimes he'd tell me, hey, Miguel, I want you to do the afternoon service. You know, and on Sundays, we got the main service. And then in the afternoon, we have another service. And back when I'm 13, 14, 15, 16, he was asking me to do that. And I mean, I didn't realize back then how much it prepared me to think maturely, to articulate thoughts, to try to inspire and motivate people. And
mhm,
ultimately, that's what Melbourne Motivation is, right? And I think that's even a part of the reason I called it Melbourne Motivation. And just assessing my gifts with, I really love people and their stories. People are interesting, right?
mm,
And what better way? Now I'm getting to interview and feature Caribbean folks from all over Jamaica, Trinidad, St. Lucia. Are you kidding me? And it would appear that we're different. But when you sit down and listen to the stories, we're all like the same. And
mhm. Yes.
you know, we love our families, we love God, and we all have this desire to make a great impact in the world. And so I think all those factors aligned went into my thinking. The actual execution, it was something I had to think about because, you know, I'm very locked into a pathway to purpose in what I'm doing in the education space, helping to grow this
Yes.
company. But what I
Mhm,
realized, you know, Pathway to Purpose is a business. We partner with middle schools and high schools to help prepare the students for college. And it's about geared around empowering the next generation of young scholars. And what I
mhm.
quickly realized that Melbourne Motivation was very tied and aligned. It's the same mission. I
Yep.
am
Mhm,
interviewing young Caribbean folks, whether they're in the States or back in the specific Caribbean countries, and I'm helping to amplify their voice and, you know, through being on a big radio station, helping to uplift their movement. And so there was a whole lot of, call it symmetry and alignment. And so those were some of the things and factors I was thinking about that, you know, made me feel good to say, you know what, Miguel, whatever it's going to take, no matter how stressful it might be, I'm willing to do
mm.
it and do it passionately and in a very excited way.
So there's one word that you just said, and you said willing. And I think a lot of times we always feel like we have to have all the answers. We always feel like we have to have everything already figured out. But a lot of times, if you even look over the Bible, you look through scripture, most of the people that God used, they were willing.
Yeah.
Even if they didn't have all the answers, even if they had doubt. I mean, because if we take a look at Moses, I mean, brother had like a couple of good excuses as to why he couldn't do it, right? But he was still willing. He still went. He's like,
Yeah.
I don't know about this. I stutter. I need help. What am I gonna tell these people? You already know your people are crazy. What
Yeah.
am I gonna tell them people, right? And I think that's so important because we won't always have the answers. And to be honest, we don't always need it, because I think sometimes if we have the full entirety of everything that God is going to do, we're going to spoil it. And I think there's also an element of surprise that keeps us connected to God, because the more He, and I'm sure you can attest to this, the more He reveals is the more you want to know, but what's next? You know, like
Absolutely.
you're like, what's next? And so with every radio interview that you do, every person, every new person that comes on your show, you're like, man, this person is a good person, and they tell somebody. And so it's been going on for such a long time, and it's transitioned, and
Yeah,
even to the point where you have there has been expansion and growth into the physical space of Jamaica, where it's the, like you're being aired there.
oof,
How is, like, that's God, right?
it's God.
So I mean,
It's
you
God.
had promotion on all types of levels. So I think, thank you for sharing that about being willing, because we have to do that, especially as we get into 2022. What are we doing, one, to prepare? Because one of the things you talked about was that God was preparing you this whole entire time. But even while God was preparing you, I'm sure that as He was preparing you, you are also being you're open to the preparation, right? So we want to make sure that we're always teachable, we're always coachable, we're always open to whatever God is doing, because we serve a God who's not going to lead us astray.
Absolutely.
That's not His nature. So I just I want to say that. And if you have anything else to add,
Yeah.
please.
You know, what I would say about that in terms of being willing is there's a couple things. I always try to maintain some underlying principles and philosophies that guide my life.
Mm-hmm.
And I rely on those a lot. And I also do a lot of reading, and I'm easily inspired. I think that's the first part. I'm easily inspired. And I
That's
think the
good.
opportunity really inspired me. And so I was open to allowing that. But in my recent readings, I came across something, and it said that, as a human being, we live really on like three planes or in three worlds simultaneously. The first one is in the physical world, right? And
Mm-hmm.
we see the world in that way. And the second is in the mental, right? The world is mental. The way we see the world is mental, and we have to balance that. And the third one is in the spiritual world. And so, as a human being, what we're trying to do all day, every day, is like balance those three realms. And it went
Mm-hmm.
even a bit further to say that the majority of us, we see the world from this physical perspective. And that's where I think some of us, we need to know exactly how is that dot going to connect to that dot, going to connect to that dot before we take the leap, before we do it. And that's the
Mm-hmm.
physical world. There's nothing wrong with that. Again, but the book also went as far as to say, the most powerful of the three is the spiritual world,
Right.
right? And whether that be prayer, whether that be meditation, whether that you finding time to do some yoga,
Mm-hmm.
exercise as well can be very spiritual. But that's the most powerful, and it's true. And the second most powerful is the mental, right? Seeing the world from a mental place, showing up in the world from a mental place. And the third one is the physical. There's nothing wrong with the physical, but consider society right now. That's how we often define our self-worth. That's often the thing that we say is going to give me confidence or not. But as I think about it, and I really try to wrap my brain around that, I see where my upbringing and just how God made me, I'm very attached to seeing the world from a mental place. And then just
Mm-hmm.
by nature and nurture of my family, I grew up in church, so I understood, spirit and moving in that way. And I think the willingness comes from that. And,
Mm-hmm.
if I can be confident mentally, and if I can have a vision mentally, and if I can connect that with how I was taught to have faith and believe, then you know what? I'm willing to see what the outcome is going to be. And I don't need to know how the dots are going to connect. But what I'm going to
Right.
do is be inspired, be motivated, and I'm going to figure out what does the best version of myself look like tackling this mission or this obstacle. And I think that's just how I've been going about it. And as I said, it's been divine how it's been working out.
It
You
has,
know,
it has, it has been great. So now that you have been in this space, how long you've been doing Melbourne Motivation now?
since March of this year, and it's weekly, right? And so, what, 4 weeks in a month? Miguel, where you gonna find four people each month willing to be interviewed? People in Jamaica and Trinidad, and yeah, it's been divine. Some of the actual stories. I see someone checked in that Miss Carice, who I interviewed, she's in Jamaica, and I found her. Honestly, when I connected with her, I told you I have no idea how your profile came on my radar, but I reached
Mm.
out to her. She's an event host, MC, and then she also does. She's a voiceover talent, and I
Oh.
thought, whoa, that's super interesting. I've never heard of anyone even being in Jamaica pursuing being a voiceover talent. I reached out to her. We had a fantastic interview. I actually happened to be in Jamaica, so I did Melbourne Motivation from Jamaica. She's in Jamaica. But she said, Miguel, before you hit me up, I was I was doing some thinking, and I was trying to figure out if this what I'm pursuing, I'm supposed to continue. And I'm praying and I'm talking to God and I'm asking God all these questions. And she said, the day you sent that message, I was actually on my way driving from work to home. And so when I saw the message, I just couldn't believe it. Because that very week, she was asking God and talking to God and searching for answers. And out of nowhere, boom, here comes Miguel, talking about, hey, do you want to be featured on the radio? And she's like, for me, I've been trying to get on these radio platforms forever. And so, boom,
Wow.
there goes a sign for her
Yep.
that, this was the answer she was looking for. And so there are all these stories, and realities that populate, just for, I think, from me being curious and willing to take on the task.
Yep, that's good. I'm so glad. And that's the God that we serve, where He is just always orchestrating different things on our behalf in different ways. So, what has it been like since you have taken this leap? Do you think you would have done anything differently?
Different? No, absolutely not.
Mm.
But one of my principles that I live by is just recognizing that I'm doing things for the first time.
Mm.
There's no blueprint. I
Wow.
um,
That's
coming to America, getting acclimated to an entire new country.
no blueprint for that.
There's no blueprint for that. There's no
None.
blueprint. There's none. Being
No
a
blueprint.
being a first generation college student, you know, there's no blueprint. How to figure it out.
Mhm.
Taking on corporate. I've had some amazing job in corporate. Bloomberg's the seventh, eighth richest man in the world. These companies is tough to get into, but I didn't know
Mhm.
any of that. All I knew is I'm Jamaican, and if you give me the opportunity to tell you why I want to work at this company, I think you're going to believe me. But there's no
Mhm.
blueprint for any of that stuff. And so anywhere where I fail, anywhere where it caused me stress, anxiety, um, I don't get down on the result. I just know that there was no blueprint for it.
Mhm.
And did I do it in a way that I truly invested the thought behind it? I was I was clear on what I was trying to accomplish. Did I do that? And if I did that, I don't worry about it. When the challenges come up, most likely it was something that I couldn't control. And
Yeah.
if that's the
Mhm.
case, I'm cool with that. And so this journey has been one. I'm learning so much technical issues, all kinds of things, but
Mhm.
those things are outside of my control, and so nah, nothing different. I'm just accepting the fact that these goals that are big goals, these things that I'm doing it for the first time. And in many ways I'm creating the blueprint, and that's the blessing from God, that opportunity.
Absolutely. I love what someone said here, because God wants his kids to create their own paths. And that's so
Yeah.
true, because a lot of times we don't realize that God needs us. We need God and God needs us. Why? Because we are the body. We are his hands and feet. So a lot of times we have to do things and then he's like, okay, let's work and do this, right?
Yeah.
So it's twofold, where we're being guided by God and we're hearing from God, but there are also sometimes where we're stepping out and doing things. Obviously, you want to make sure that it's in wisdom and all of those things, but like, you went in such a line with something that where you were already in alignment with, and God
Right.
just automatically added the increase for it. And I think that's so powerful in and of itself, because a lot of times, like you said, we are waiting for all the dots to connect, and God is like, listen, I've given you one dot. It's almost like the woman with the jar of oil, and Elijah, I think it's Elijah and not Elisha.
Yeah.
Elijah,
Oh, I
like,
messed
well,
him
what
up
do you
too.
right? Like, what do you have in your house? So everything that we need, we already have. Whether it's a skill, whether it's the knowledge, whether it's the resources, whether it's the time, whether it's the finances, we have something that we can start with. So what do you have in your hand? What do you have in
Mm.
your house? And I think it's so important for us to know, because in this journey, you took a step back and you said, you know what, I've been preparing for this. So this whole entire time, God prepared you this whole entire time for that. And you had everything already on the inside of you. And what did he
Yeah.
do? He kept adding and kept adding and kept adding. So now you know how to, I mean, it's not in your wheelhouse naturally, but you know how to navigate tech issues,
Yeah.
right? You know how to do certain things now that you never would have done before. And that's one thing that I appreciate so much about our Heavenly Father, is that He is a true Father, right? So He's multifaceted in all that He does. So yes, you went in and you're like, okay, I'm going to do Melbourne into motivation. And you had other things that you were thinking about, obviously. But God is like, okay, well, I'm going to also teach you this. And meanwhile, you don't have no idea what's going on behind the scenes. I'm
Yeah.
already working to put you in front of great men that you don't have any idea about at this
None.
point. And I'm gonna let you go on and do this, do your radio show, because when we are work on it, it's on a different level. So it's so exciting to see, and sometimes we just have to leap, right? Like, this is what this
Yeah.
whole life is about, is leaping. Even when you don't know, you're not sure, you don't have an idea of what is taking place. So after you made the leap, and you've been here for a while as well too, what was required of you after you made the decision? So outside of, obviously, navigating um, your other responsibilities in your life, what are some other things that were required of you after you made the decision to leave?
Yeah, that's a great question. I decide to do it. Now I have to figure it out. And that's why I say I
Mm-hmm.
think God always, puts me in places and show me where I'm supposed to be before I get there. And so what I mean by that is, when I went to corporate America, and primarily, Bloomberg is where I spend the most time. I don't think God gave me the opportunity to work in corporate to stay in corporate. I think
Mm.
God put me
Say
there
that, say
to,
that again, because I need you to say that again, because you
yeah,
know how as
yeah.
if we arrive, we're like, Marie.
You know what I'm saying? And so, we come from a Caribbean culture where, like, you take Usain Bolt, he wins one gold medal. That wasn't like it. He's like, I got to go back and win a couple more, right? And so that's the way I
Nice
was
to
looking
do
at,
that.
I was looking at corporate, and I remember being a kid and just having all these lofty goals. And I tell my mom, I'm going to be a billionaire. And she was like, yeah, okay. I remember one time I was talking to her, and we're talking about money. And I was like, I don't know what you're
Mhm.
talking about. I'm buying my house cash. And she was like, yeah, okay. And so I've always had these lofty goals. Miguel, how are you going to do it? And I think God put me in corporate to learn how it's done. And so Bloomberg at the time was a company that was making $9 billion a year. How does a company make $9 billion a year, right? And so I
Mhm.
learned so much from being in that space. I learned about processes. I learned about systems. I learned how to think from a place of efficiency. I learned how quickly innovation could happen, right? And
Mhm.
so I learned that sometimes you have to do multiple things at once, and like that's the process. And so at through that experience, I learned so much that it's still with me. And so after I decided, I'm gonna do Melbourne Motivation, my initial thought process was, okay, what kind of process do I need to put in place? What kind of system do I need to put in place to find my guests? After I find my guests, what's my repeatable system as to how I'm going to speak to them, how I'm going
Mhm.
to make clear to them what is Melbourne Motivation, what is the purpose, you know, how does it benefit them? And so what's my system behind that? Can I make that repeatable? You know, I've never worked with a radio station. And so Melbourne Motivation is cool because I could do it from anywhere in the world. We do it through Skype. And so, yeah, I've done it from Jamaica, California, North Carolina, Mexico. Beautiful thing. I could just do it through Skype. But that means I'm relying on the radio station to do their part to make sure that all the hard work that I put in to find a guest, to prep my guests, to make sure my guest is ready, that on showtime, like it is exactly what I said. And so I think the big takeaway is, okay, I'm going to do it. Now, what's the process I can put in place so that it's repeatable? And that's the first thing I did, found my process, put my process in place. And then after that, it's just being, I love to say, like, I am my guesses, I'm the first person to listen to them. And I joke often that I feel bad for the folks that listen on interview day, because a part of my process is to speak to my guests and genuinely get to know them, genuinely get to understand what their business is. And those conversations, by the time I'm finished, I'm like, oh man, I am charged up. I am inspired. I am motivated. And I'm like, so at the time, by the time we get to airing, it's almost like, you know, listening audience, I hope you got what I already got, you know, but it boils back down to having a process to making sure that it is as purposeful, it is as authentic, and to make sure that it's a repeatable system when we talk about, you know, doing 4 interviews a month with individuals that oftentimes I'm getting in touch with them for the first time, or even folks that's in my network that I've known forever. I've never spoken to them in this way. And so I've got to make sure that there's a repeatable system, and that it's as authentic as possible. And so I think those are the first 2 things that I did: put the process in place, and then, you know, just make sure that the feeling, you know, the purpose behind it was there, and I was showing up for each and every guest. And that's the way I'm continuing to move.
That's good. And I love what you said about the process, right? So a lot of times we have ideas, we go, we move out, but then we don't always make sure that we are being diligent with what we have. So we fall off easily, we get lazy, you know, and we don't always show up. So I think it's important for when you said that there's a process and you put a process in place and you work the process, right? So you didn't have a blueprint, you started from scratch. You didn't know what the process was going to look like, but God fine-tuned everything along the way. And I think it's important to share that because, like I said, we always want, you know, the point A to point B to point C, but then it doesn't leave room for flexibility. It doesn't leave room for other things to come in and even to shake things up a little bit for you to even think differently. If we have things in it's such a tunnel vision, then there's no room for God to even do anything differently because we're coming in with with our own plans, with our own agenda. So, you know, God is a gentleman, so he's going to be like, all right, you do, you know, you do you. So I think I really love that you said that. So what would you share with someone who is on the verge of their own leap story or trying to figure out, you know, do I take this leap? Do I do this? Like, what do you share with them?
Yeah, it's a fantastic question. I think the first thing I'll say, and you said it earlier, you know, kind of like what's in your house, what do you already have in your hand, and so I take that a bit further. And the first thing I'd like to say, which is, you know, take a moment and think what is in your mental house. You know,
Mm,
what's in your mental house? What are you really thinking about? What do you really care about? Right? I say start there. The second piece is, you know, what's really in your heart? What's in the house of your heart? What's there? What's really in your heart? Right? And I think if we start at those 2 places, right away we're tapping into seeing the world from a mental place, seeing the world from a spiritual place. And if we can get clarity from those 2 places, then whatever the action steps we need to take, we have the deep core underlying inspiration to start it, to figure out how to start it, to figure out how to do it, how to put it in place, how to get other people to care about it, you need a deep, deep, deep rooted core motivation. And so I say start from those two places. And then the third one is, I think it boils down to just belief, you know? And the first piece of belief is believing in yourself, you know? And I think if we believe in ourselves, as cliche as it sounds, 100%, and also being curious as to, you know what, I don't believe in myself right now 100%. I believe in myself 85%. Well, what's going to make you get the other 15? You know, I believe in myself 90%. Well, what do you need to know or learn for you to believe 100%? Right? And so I think the second thing is just belief. And I think once we have that belief, then we can get others to believe. And I think the last thing I'll say is, don't be moved by the result. You know, it goes back to the process. You know, put a process in place, or a process helps you get things done, but systems make it sustainable. Right? So process, what's the process to get this done? Great. Well, think of that. Now, what's the systems you can put in place, put in your idea to make it sustainable? And so I think those three things, if we put it together and we say, you know what, it's 2021 right now, I'm going into 2022, I'm going to take a moment, see what's in my mind, see what's in my heart, right? I'm going to believe in this because God is giving me this as a vision. And you know what, my next step is to find what process and systems I need to put in place to make it, you know, substantial, to make it what you want it to be. And so I think that's what I'd love to leave.
That's good. That's good. And for those of you who are online with us, thank you so much for joining. Please, I would love to hear from you all specifically. If you want to drop anything in the chat as we're coming to a close here, you can either share your own leap story. What did you leap to? Or, also share if someone is on the verge of their own leap story, how would you encourage them? And I really love you talked about systems, because everything is a system, whether we like it or not, whether we don't recognize it or not, because that's actually something that a lot of people don't recognize. Everything is a system. There's a system to everything, right? And so it's important for us to recognize that we need systems. We have the process, as you talked about, but we need a sustainable system. So, and then once we have that, right, we have something that we can work with. There's no reason that you can't build on it, right? Build on that system, take out pieces, incorporate new pieces. You talked about being at Bloomberg and innovation happening all the time.
Yeah.
And I want to say that also a part of being a part of leaping is also being in a space where you're in the place where you want to go. So never being in a place where you're comfortable, always saying, okay, well, where am I going to go to next, or where do I want to go, and putting yourself around people or putting yourself in places that would allow you to get there. Because if you want to, if you want to be healthy, as an example, you don't want to be hanging around people who are, going out all the time, popping bottles, because alcohol produces weight. Like, I don't know where people don't think that doesn't happen, but it does. Alcohol produces weight. Or people who are always going to fast food, or always eating out. Like, if you're trying to do right with your finances and being a good steward over your finances, then you can't go, you can't be hanging out with people all the time. Like, the like-mindedness, I think, is important, but also placing yourself in a place that would help that as well. I see someone asked a question: when taking the leap, how does one manage any associated financial drought? You being the business person, Miguel, I'll let you take that.
Yeah. Man, I love that question. Thank you for that question, because oftentimes, God will give us a download. God will give us an idea, something come from our minds, come from our heart. And he said, well, I don't have the money to do it. And I think it goes back to seeing the world from a physical, mental, spiritual place. And if we understand that the mental and the spiritual is more powerful than the physical, then we can't let, what our pockets look like, or what our bank books look like, stop us from manifesting that idea. And so what I'm getting around to is, in the last year, right? You know, Path to the Purpose, we're a small business and we needed to, we had this great idea to produce these college study flashcards, right? And it became like, all right, great idea. Where are we going to find the money to scale it? And so we're like, all right, I'm going to start writing grants, right? I've never written grants before. I've written business plans, right? So I knew how to take an idea and articulate it on paper. And so we started to write business grants and have won over $100,000 writing business grants. But here's the point that I'm getting to. The point that I'm getting to is that there is so much money out there. There is so much money out there in the space of grants, right? And there are grants for people that just have an idea. There's someone out there with means that says, you know what, I recognize that women, female business owners, black business owners, they have great ideas, but they don't have access to the capital. So here is a $5,000 grant that I am given. And all you have to do is be very clear on your idea and be able to articulate it, to write it down so that someone else is aware of it, someone else believes it, and you'll win this money. So there goes. I didn't know where this money was going to come from. I'm in a financial drought. I'm using up all the money I'm getting paid. Where will I find money to put into this business? Well, it's not the money you needed. It was the belief in the idea you had. And if you believe it, just know that through grants, right? People are out there that's willing to give you the money you need to push your idea forward, to push your mission forward, to push that thing forward. So, needless to say, this day and age, money is no longer something that should stop you from getting where you want to go.
Absolutely. And I'll also add to that, because a lot of times we think that once we get the idea, that means it's go time. Sometimes before you even go, you have to wait. So I remember listening to a sermon the other day, and it talked about the different definitions of acceleration. And one of the definitions of acceleration, I guess from a physics standpoint, also means to slow down. And so we often get something and we want to go. Now, there's room for going, absolutely, but there's also a time for us to step back and plan and prepare and come up with a process. And so that gives you the opportunity to think and to say, right? And you said also to have the confidence, right? And you can boldly say, God, you gave me this idea. You have to fund it.
Yeah.
Clearly, I can't fund it.
God, where's the money coming from? Talk to
right?
me.
You already knew I couldn't fund it. So how are you going to give me something and
Hey,
and there's no resources? So I need you to fund it, God, because you gave it to
exactly.
me and you're not going to lie. And we won't be embarrassed, God. So I won't be embarrassed and you won't be embarrassed. So I need the funds. So,
Like that.
sometimes, and it's a lot of it, too, is just like you said, it's the belief in ourselves. It's the confidence, but that be stepping into the space, we build up our faith, and so we begin to start. So, and I can imagine with all of your ventures, even going to Wall Street, it was one step, right? And that one step builds your faith, and the next step builds your faith, and then all of a sudden you're in a place where you're like, man, I can't believe I even got here. Like, thank you, God. This was like, you look over, you're like, what if I had not taken the chance? And so it goes back to what we had said earlier. You don't have to have everything figured out. I think somebody asked, how do you find the people? Listen, I have the same, I said the same thing. Where am I going to find all these people? And you know what I did one day? I need people from my email list. True story. I went on Facebook and I sent a message to everybody on my list. And I said, listen, I need people to subscribe to my email list. Will you subscribe? And people subscribe. Now, everybody didn't subscribe because you don't need everybody either.
Absolutely.
And sometimes God will weed out people, and that's a good thing. You don't need everybody. Even when people unsubscribe from my list all the time, I said, that's okay, because they're not meant to be in that space. But sometimes we put in the work, and we put in the work in different ways. It doesn't always, and I would also venture to say, and I think you can probably add to this too, Miguel, that we can't watch everybody else's process. So sometimes we see people, they have, thousands of likes and thousands of comments and all this other stuff. And then it sort of jolts us because, and I can attest to it, right? I think the highest tonight was probably 11. That's the highest my first live was like 20-something people. Let me not shortchange. But over the couple of lives, you know? But I'm grateful because I
Yeah.
know one day I'm going to go back and say, I remember. Like I think my live last week, there was nobody on my live. And I'm
Yeah.
going to be able to say, I remember there was a point in time when no one was on my live, or my best friend alone was on my live, or my best friend in Jamaica was on my live, and my other best friend came on. It was just best friends. It was nobody else, right? And I
Yeah.
talk to them all the time. So it's not like I'm having any new people on. But I'm grateful for the people who are coming into the space, right? And saying, okay, we're going to support in this way, because helpers come in different forms. And so I say all that to say, don't despise the days of small beginnings. The Bible says that. I think that's in Zechariah. Don't despise the days of small beginnings because the Lord rejoices to see the work begin. And
Hello.
so even the small things that we do, God will rejoice over it because what I believe he's saying, he's like, yes, my daughter is starting. Now I can move because nothing
Absolutely.
happened. Everything is already happening in heaven. We just need to do it on earth and pull down heaven.
Mm.
Everything has already happened. God has already looked over your year. All that's already happened. God is just like waiting. Okay, I need her to move. And once you move, once you're like, okay, he gives you the unction, you go. He's like, yes, okay, now I can add this. Now I can bring Peter.
Absolutely.
Now I can bring Sally. Now I can bring the resources. Like that's how it all works. And so this has been great. And I just want to also encourage people that there's nothing that God starts that he will not finish.
Indeed.
You may stop it, but God is always going to finish it. Philippians 1 verse 6 says, that we're confident, being confident that he
Mm.
who started a good work in us is able to complete it. And complete
Mm.
means that it's done, it's finished. There's nothing else to do, right? And so he's completing until the day of Jesus Christ. So what that means, until Jesus comes, God is perfecting and working everything. So if you have something to do,
Yeah.
that means God is going to be working until Jesus Christ comes. So
Yeah.
that means if you're not doing anything, then you ain't doing nothing and you waiting until Jesus Christ comes back and you have nothing to show for it. So I encourage you to just be confident in that God is not going to start something and he's not going to finish it. First of all, he needs to make sure that, God likes to show off too and he can get the
Oh
glory.
yeah.
So he has to do it in such a way. So that's good. I mean, has been such a tremendous conversation.
Indeed.
And I really appreciate it. I'm hoping that this has inspired those of you that are on with us, that stayed on with us. Thank you. We're almost to an hour, but however the Holy Spirit leads, take full control, do whatever you want to do. But it's been a
Hello.
great conversation because I think it's important for people to hear different stories because we don't always hear like the reason why you have Melbourne Motivation is so that the everyday Caribbean person, their
Yep.
stories, their voices can be heard, right? So even though you hear other people's stories every week, somebody got to hear your story. We got to answer questions, right? We got to
Yeah.
share our own perspective, and also include certainly some biblical principles and what God was able to do in and through us. So before we get off the live, can you please let people know where they can find you? I know you're all over, you're a big man in us, so you're all over the place. So all the handles, let us know.
Now, most definitely. Let me just thank you again for creating the space, creating this conversation. So many times, we open social media and we do it for comedy, we do it for laughs. And the truth is, it should be a space that inspires us and moves us to action, and prepare us for our future. And so, certainly, this conversation, I'm sure I enjoyed it. You enjoyed it, and I'm optimistic folks that tuned in enjoyed it. But you can definitely find me, Melbourne Motivation. That's the Instagram, Melbourne Motivation. So definitely please follow the Instagram, also on Facebook. I created a YouTube channel so you can go and watch some of the past interviews. I've done maybe like 34, 35 interviews. I'm still uploading them week after week. And so, and that's the thing too, to your point, Mona-Lee, I don't worry about like how many people listen or watch. It's I record it, it's recorded, and I get now to put it out. And because the work was done to make it a fruitful conversation, then I know it's gonna touch the one person that needed to hear it whenever they watched it, whenever they
Right.
watch it. And so,
Mhm.
yeah, Melbourne Motivation, Instagram, Facebook, subscribe to the YouTube channel. MelbourneMotivation.com is coming very soon. And so if there's anything you had a question based on this conversation, feel free to DM me. My personal DM is I am Gel, IAMGUEL underscore. And so feel free to reach out, DM anytime. But I appreciate this. Thank you so much, Mona.
Yes, absolutely. And thank you all so much for joining me again on another installment of The Best Investment. As I mentioned earlier, this entire month of December is the Leap series. So I'm going to have individuals come on and share their own leap story. So Miguel shared his about the radio station and Melbourne Motivation and his radio program and all of that. And we look forward to seeing him. So when I see him on the big TV, I'm gonna say, "Oh, my friend, I know Miguel. I know
Throw
Miguel."
it out there. Throw it out there.
Right, right. So that we know that's going to happen. So thank you all so much. Please make sure that you share the replay, comment on the replay, share it, like. Like, comment, share it with individuals. We want everybody to get this word out. And one thing I always, say is that sometimes the message hits different a couple of years later, even a couple of months later. And so sometimes, it's not for the now. Sometimes it's for later. So even people that are on now, something may happen in their life in a couple of months, and they're like, "Oh, that's what they were talking about." Oh, or that
Yeah.
resonates a little bit more now that they have heard, and it's sort of, seeped into them a little bit. So thank you all so much. Please make sure that you come back next week on this same page, my personal page, Mona-Lee Belizaire. We're going to have another guest next week, and I'm so excited about her story because she was in corporate and left to become an entrepreneur, and her story is phenomenal. And so we're
Yes.
so excited. I'm so excited for this series. Thank you so much, Miguel. Thank you, thank you, thank you. God continue to bless you. You all make sure that you follow him and listen to the radio station because when him go large, y'all want to be able to say,
I
Right.
appreciate
So
you.
absolutely. Thank you all so much. And remember, you are the best investment. Take care. Bye.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.